Okay.
All right. So hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Anthony from Seed Legals. I talk to many startups at different phases of their fundraising journey. I've been there myself. I used to head up PBCI Player. After that, built startup, sold it, built startup, sold it, invested in a few, got tired of paying lawyers, built Seed Legals. So what we're going to talk about today is traction and showing traction to investors. But while talking to Perdia and Neme, they mentioned that you're doing pitch decks and pitches for investors. So I thought that we would start with a quick overview of a pitch deck structure, because that actually is a nice segue into traction, because the key slide in the pitch deck is traction. So just in the format of this, I think we have an hour. I'm probably going to talk for 25 minutes or thereabouts, but what I'd love is you post your messages in chat, and then when I stop looking at the camera, we'll turn to those questions. Now, just before we kick off, I always love to do my audience research first, so we talk together rather than at you. So let me pick 3 people randomly, ask the key thing that you're looking for from the session, one problem that you'd like to solve. So let me start with Lily, who's looking intently at the camera. So hello, Lily, tell me a bit what you're doing and which key thing can I answer?
Actually, you mean me, do you? Because
exactly, yes.
I am actually Philippa, and I can see my daughter changed my name to Lily. So I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm Philippa. Pitch deck. So I already built my pitch, okay? But I changed it about 80 times by now, because every time I show it to somebody, there is something wrong. And I don't mean, mistakes.
Brilliant.
Just don't they don't understand my financial overcast or any, there is always something. So when it's that moment when I say, no, this is my pitch and I don't change it for anybody, or do I do different pitches for different?
Fabulous point. Why don't I pop that in the chat window just so I remember to get to it, because that is an excellent point that bugs everyone who gets random feedback from investors, and I'll get to that. All right, so hello, Lucy, over to you. What would be like one key thing you'd love to cover today?
Morning. Very similar to Philippa, I have changed my pitch deck multiple times trying to appease everybody. But one slide I always kind of struggle with, especially being pre-seed, pre-revenue, is the financial slide. What do we put in there? Obviously, it's the finger in the air kind of stuff. What do investors really want to see? Is it just our ambitions at the opportunity? Some advice around that would be fabulous.
All right, fantastic. And that is a subject close to my heart. In fact, if you Google Seed Legal's 5-year business plan, you'll see an article and I think video exactly on the 5-year business plan. So we'll get back to that in a few moments. And then Lucio, hello. Tell us quickly the one key thing you might be looking for.
Hello. Well, we are about to launch our MVP. We have some early adopters. We haven't agreed the price with them, but we're looking for more early adopters, and we are in this doubt. We're actually butting ourselves saying like how much shall we charge to the early adopters? It's worth to have them on board if they are not paying for, because we don't want to push them to run away. But yeah, we kind of struggle with that.
So your question was about your developers or the customers and your customer pricing?
The customer pricing.
All right. Okay. All right. That was a great point and something that I actually was going to talk about. All right. So thank you, everyone. All right. So let me start at, I was going to say at the beginning, which was about traction, but I'm going to start a little bit earlier on the pitch deck. So to me, a pitch deck is like a Hollywood drama. It starts with the intro to the characters, then it gets everyone excited and you bought into the story, and at the end it ends with drama and leaves you wanting more. So what does that mean for your pitch deck? Well, the pitch deck to me is a formula that is maybe like 7 steps or thereabout. Thing number 1 is, what is the problem you're solving? Thing number 2 is, how are you solving it? Thing number 3 is maybe more information on the technology product so people don't think it's just vaporware in a pitch deck. The next thing then is, what's the market size? The next one is who's your competition. The next one is your 5-year business plan. The next one is your traction, and we'll obviously focus on that. And the last one is, well, there's a team, and then how much you're looking for. And always end with the ask. Otherwise, investors go, that was very nice. Why are you talking to me about this? So your last slide's generally going to go raising 300K, offering SEIS, EIS, have advance assurance, your email address and name so people know who to contact, because at the end, you want to have built up the desire and then they go and contact you. So when I see a pitch deck that starts off by essentially just saying what the company does, I think that misses the mark. It needs to show the problem you are solving for somebody. And I went through exactly the same thing with Seed Legals. Is our website, which by the way, I think has, in a sense, the same first messaging as the pitch deck, which is showing the problem you solve. So our website said, we do document automation and contract mechanization or something. And then one day I woke up and I thought there are 0 people in the world who go, guess what I need today? Document automation. But what everyone wants is the fastest way to close their funding round. So I completely redid our webpage and website homepage to focus on the problem that customers are looking to solve. So if in your pitch deck, you're showing a solution to a customer problem, even though it's not a customer that's reading it, it's an investor, I think they're going to go, you're solving a problem that lots of people are going to want. That means you're going to be successful. That means I want in. So that's the formula. And if you want to see many examples of me picking apart in the nicest way people's pitch decks, do a Google search for Seed Legal's Pitch Deck Clinic. And the idea is people keep coming to me going, Anthony, can you look at my pitch deck and give feedback? And I go, I'd love to. There are not enough hours in the day. Let me solve this in a scalable way. So we get on a call and a video, but I think it'll open your eyes to all the things that are that you may have missed in your own slide deck. And again, to try and get it back to the story arc that gets people bought into you solving a problem and ends with them wanting in. Now, to address Philippa's point about every time you go to an investor meeting, the investor tells you some random stuff. And the first time you go and redo everything, and the next time you do redo something, and but eventually you've worked it out that investors just give you random pieces of feedback and make shit up as they go along. And now the question is, which ones are sensible and which ones are not? And you've noticed that investors have a different angle. Some of them are astute and know what they're talking about. Some of them have some money and they would like to invest. And I was in the audience on a panel with 2 prominent investors. One of them was Harry Briggs from BGF, and the other one was Hussein Kanji from Hoxton, I think. And someone in the audience said, how do you evaluate which companies to invest in? And Hussein Kanji started by going, well, I look at the 5-year business plan. I ask them for the Excel spreadsheet. I run the numbers. I do a net present value calculations. I look at the market size. I look at the competitor metrics. I work out the valuation myself. I look at the amount they're looking to raise, and I run the numbers. And based on that, I invest or not. And Harry Briggs went, well, if I like the founders and it's a cool idea and the valuation's not insane, I'm in. And I realized at that point, there is no single investor. There are endless numbers of personalities. So what you want to do is, obviously you can't keep changing your pitch deck, but what you can do is you can change your pitch. So go with this, story arc, I think, nice lifestyle images, and have big, bold slides that let you freely innovate based on the investor persona. And I've done a sort of a joke article on what type of investor are you? And some of them are, it varies from, I want to return on investment. I'd like to save the planet. It doesn't matter if you make money or not, but if it saves the planet, I'm in. It might be, I want to hang out with the cool kids. I really want to be a startup founder myself, but I'm not game enough to do that. So if I can be part of the action, some of them might want to be the early adopters. Hey, I was the first money in on whatever company. And some of them are just give me my SEIS. What do you do again? You got SEIS? I'm in. So work out when you're talking to the investor, you might even ask that, hey, what are the key drivers for you on investment? And then tweak your verbal pitch to focus on that. All right, which then takes me to Lucy's point on the 5-year business plan. So 5-year business plan is a made up set of numbers because you are, you're at beta stage, you don't have revenue traction or anything. So how can you possibly know what the business is going to be in 5 years? And should you do this at all? Well, firstly, if you're going to HMRC to get SEIS or EIS advance assurance, which is usually the difference between investors going, I'm in, versus call me when you got your advance assurance. It's not legally required, but it's a good insurance to get. It helps close things. But when you apply for advance assurance, you have to show HMRC a 5-year business plan so that they can see that you've got a growth business. So you're going to make up some numbers. And here the question is, how do investors look at it? And then how does it influence the numbers you come up with? So I'm not an investor myself. It gets crazy when people ask me to invest, but as a proxy investor, channeling what an investor might want to tell you, as an investor, I would look at the 5-year business plan to look at as a level of ambition for the founders. So if you show that after 5 years, you've got £1 million a year in revenue, as an investor, I would say that's called slightly pejoratively a hobby business. A hobby business means that it's a business for the founders and the few employees. It's great, you're paying yourself a decent salary. It's a business. That's the way countries run. But it's not an investable business because there's no return on capital for the investor. And so investors might call it a hobby business. For you, it's great, but you're not going to raise investment. On the flip side, if after 5 years you're showing 100 million a year in revenue, that is amazing, but statistically unlikely. So whenever I see a blockchain business going, we're doing year 5 is 100 million pounds a year in revenue, you go, that's awesome. That's much faster growth than Twitter. And you'd be a FTSE 500 company, which is fantastic, but unlikely to happen. And so investors are just going to treat every other number of yours with a similar sense of disbelief. So what is the right formula? Well, I think in the initial years, a 3x year-on-year growth, and then that might tail off slightly to a 2x year-on-year growth. And if you're targeting 10 million a year in year 5 in revenue, that's a rule of thumb might be 10x revenue is your valuation. So that would mean 100 million valuation after year 5. And that is a fantastic return for investors. So 10 million a year revenue by year 5 might be a good place. There's no right or wrong. It's obviously going to be vastly different if it's a med tech or an IoT or a SaaS business. But for your typical SaaS business with recurring revenue, that might be the good place to shoot for. So that covers the 5-year business plan, which then nicely leads us to traction. So the thing with investors, and this is where traction is so important, is investors have got no idea if it's a good idea or a bad idea. The only thing they've got is a few bits of signal they're going to tease out from the noise. And so let's go through the cascading set of things that help you demonstrate traction. So let's start from success. So let's say a few years later, the best traction you can get is revenue. So if you've got £1 million a year revenue growing 2x or 3x year on year, that is amazing. Not only will you have an easy time finding investors, but investors will be calling you. So the high point is you've got revenue that's increasing, doubling, tripling year on year. But of course, no one here is in that position, so that's no good at all. It would be useless advice. So if you don't have revenue, what's the next best thing? Well, the next best thing are users. And if you've got user growth, but not yet revenue, that's fantastic. But that's also not useful because you're in beta stage, you don't have users yet. So if you don't have users, what can you do? Well, you might have engagement. So you don't have many users, you've only got a few hundred users. If investors go to you, amazing, how many users do you have? And you go, 50, that's like a bit of a downer. So obviously the investor, if they're not astute, might be thinking, you can have tens of thousands, hundreds of, you got 100 users. So you're not going to focus on the number of users, you're going to focus on how long they stick around for. Well, a few weeks ago, they just didn't get through onboarding, and now they get through onboarding. And now the time in our website, if you're using Google Analytics, used to be 8 seconds, and now it's 5 minutes, and they're reading our articles. So it's all about engagement. And if you can't do engagement, maybe you go a step back and you do download numbers or visits. So, hey, we've had 5,000 downloads of our app, but the astute investor will immediately ask about the engagement. So they've downloaded the app, are they sticking around? Or is it a download and they've actually not liked it, and you've just shown that you could make a lot of noise? So if you don't even yet have downloads or traction, what can you do before that? And before that is noise on the internet. And I'm amazed at how companies don't, or founders, write lots of articles, do blog posts, do social media posts, such that there's as much content around there as possible. So when investors Google your company, instead of seeing nothing, they start seeing posts everywhere. And right from the beginning of Seed Legals, that was always my strategy, which is write content, and you can be a thought leader. You can help change people's perception. And a great example of this was I love buying things from our Seed Legals customers, particularly if it's edible or drinkable. So I have vegan frozen foods, I have coffee, I have ice creams, I have biltong, whatever I find that looks interesting that I can buy. I love to give business to our customers. And one of them was a green tea company. So I love green tea. So I went to their website, and there was beautiful pictures of green tea and the different flavors and blends and so on. But what I was quite disappointed was there weren't articles on the perfect temperature for the water and when tea's harvested and how we, process the tea or ferment it or whatever it might be. And what they should, in my view, have done is write articles, getting it out on the tea websites, posting on social. So when I Google their name, I find them everywhere. And so what you want to do, and really at this beta stage, everything around traction is because you don't yet have revenue, you don't have users. It's about making as much noise as possible on the internet. And I liken it, I think it was Napoleon, where his army was surrounded by a much larger army. And what did he do? He sent his soldiers into the hills at night, a dozen of them on different hills, and they lit fires at the top of the hill. And the enemy thought, oh my God, we're surrounded. But it was actually just a few people making a lot of, in that case, fire and smoke. So if you can write articles, if you can be interviewed, if you can get out there, investors will perceive that you're bigger than you really are. And in the early stages of your business, it's really about being bigger than you are. So again, to get back to investors are going to look at your slide deck. They're going to be wowed by the wonderful graphics, lifestyle images, problem you're solving, how you're solving. You can demonstrate the market size. You can list your competitors, because by the way to list your competitors is my preferred approach, and there are different ones. One approach is the list of competitors and the different columns and the check boxes. But I don't think that's a good approach, and I've gone on a bit of a tangent, because you'll show a much larger competitor and you'll have a tick box and they won't, obviously to show your competitive advantage. But all that means is, as an investor, I go, they've raised 10 million pounds. That's why don't they have that tick box? Either it's really not important, or guess what? As soon as you have it, they just can tick the box themselves, and their product feature was your business. So instead, my approach, my preferred approach on showing competitors is a matrix of maybe pricing and complexity or something like that, or instant sign up versus managed service, whatever it might be. And in the top right quadrant, there's you and everyone else is sprinkled around, and that's my preferred approach. And the reason I'm mentioning this is, as an investor, if I happen, without knowing your segment, to know of a few different competitors that you don't know about, that's a really bad signal. So get out there and do your work to make sure you know about your various competitors and so on. Okay, so again, to recap the on metrics and traction, I think working backwards, it goes like, show your monthly recurring revenue, show your number of paying customers, show the number of non-paying customers, and we'll get back to paying or non-paying in a moment. What's the number of products that people have, signed up to? What's the month-on-month user growth? What's the revenue per month? And of course, if you pre-revenue, you've got a hard time showing those, but that is ultimately your goal. So going now back to Lucio's point about maybe free or paid. So that's a good segue for me on everything I've been talking about has been, if you've got a B2C business, you've got a website or app where thousands of consumers can sign up. But what if you've got a B2B business? And with a B2B business, often, for example, legal tech companies will sell to law firms, and law firms have an insanely long sales cycle. Maybe you're looking to sell to enterprise and they've got, 1 year sales cycle. So how are you going to demonstrate traction there? And there, the formula is, well, ultimately, it's the number of signed partnership deals that have revenue. But if you're not there yet, it's signed partnership deals that are not yet delivered or not yet making revenue. And if you're not there, it's partnership letters of intent. And if you're not there, it's partnership discussions in progress. But never, hoodwink an investor. If you tell them you've got your partners page, you start listing Unilever, Colgate, LVMH, whatever it might be, the investor's going to ask, tell me why that logo is there. And if you don't have a good reason, if you go, well, I've connected with them on LinkedIn, that's not good enough. So be prepared to be grilled on what you're doing with that partner. And if you've got a signed contract with revenue, that is fantastic. If you've got a trial, that's better than nothing. If you've had a meeting with them, that's also better than nothing. But always take care to frame it so that the investor doesn't believe the logos on the page because you've got a signed deal and actually you've just met with them. You never even know. Maybe they'll do their own research. So be prepared to justify it. So by the way, as an aside, your fastest way to traction is with consumers because they make decisions the fastest. But if you happen to be in a B2B business, the decision making is often much slower. And if you're in a med tech business or a hardware business, well, if you're in med tech, it might take 5 years for your med approvals from whichever authority. So at Seed Legals, I had a choice of I could focus on a B2C proposition, founders like yourselves as customers, or I could focus on law firm partnerships. And I realized after the third law firm meeting and the third customer call that customers make decisions in about 30 minutes. That's awesome. Great. Where do I sign up? And law firms make decisions in about a year or two. So for me, I always focus on the fastest decision makers. And that means if you're a B2B company and you're sitting there for months waiting for, next step, you might want to think about that traction is going to be quite slow. You may hook a big company later, but is there a B2C approach that you can do in the meantime? All right. So let me now pause for a moment and take some questions. Oh, before I do that, I still missed Lucio's point, which was about free versus paid. So here goes. Also in the traction area, of course, what investors would love to see is you've got a business model with revenue and people are buying your products. But of course, you haven't built it yet. It's an MVP, it's a beta. Are you embarrassed to charge for it? If you give it away for free, the bar is quite low, even though it may not work and be buggy as anything. people will see, they know, they love founders, and they'll almost always be helpful and go, hey, your cap table doesn't work, your bicycle product doesn't work, whatever it is, you know, this, here's some feedback, it doesn't work on this phone. And then your goal is to be super responsive and actually action that, because that's really great feedback to help your product. But people will be forgiving if it doesn't work. But once you charge for it, people are a lot less forgiving unless you've shown them that it's a much lower fee that you're going to do, that it's a beta. You know, normally it'd be £100 a month, you'll give it for £20 a month. But your challenge is if you give things away for free that you want to pay for later, investors are going to drill into how are you converting from free to paid. And I've seen a key problem that companies in the B2B area have is they'll sign up business partners on a free trial and be unable to convert them to paid. And that might be that once it's free, you know, anyone in the enterprise can just get started and sign up and try. When it's paid, it now needs a procurement thing and someone to sign it off, and they just can't get past that hurdle. So be aware that if you do offer a free version of the product, and investors are going to want to see how it will convert, and if it hasn't yet converted or it's showing signs of poor conversion, that might be a serious problem that you have to address. All right, so now let's take a few questions. So Maya says, I've started with projections of targets of revenue for Q3. Is that a good approach? So internally with your team, projections and targets for Q3 is a fantastic approach. It's exactly what you want to do. You want to have a performance-driven business. So you're going to go, in Q3, we'd like to get 12 paying customers or 100 signed up customers. And week by week, you're going to see if you're making those targets. And if you're not, you're going to try and figure out, well, we're trying this to acquire traffic. That's not working. Let's try a webinar. We'll get to paid traffic acquisition shortly, but let's try other things. So that's a fantastic measure. The problem with putting in your pitch deck, that's a problem, because pitch decks sit around for ages. And the worst case is that you're going to show in your pitch deck, it's going to go, our Q3 goals, and the investor is on a call with you in Q4, and now you have demonstrably not hit your target. If you're showing a 5-year business plan, you know, it's still part way through year one. If you're not there yet, that's okay. There's still the optimism for the rest of the year. But always be careful that your slide deck doesn't get stale and you're showing numbers which actually historically are now verifiably wrong, because that's going to be problematic. All right, so what's a good conversion rate? Says Bemensa, from free to paid. I was told 3%. I don't know the answer to that, and it's going to vary greatly by firstly the product type, and secondly by your customer acquisition strategy. So let me explain. If you're writing blog posts, in other words, free content, and people are reading it, or you know, people are coming through for a link in international publication through to your website, a 3% conversion rate might be fantastic. You've got an article that didn't cost you anything, lots of people reading it, coming through to your site. But if you're using pay-per-click advertising, a 3% conversion rate may not be good. So if you're paying Google £4 per ad and it's 1 in 33 conversion, that's £120 cost per acquisition. And if you are giving away a product still for free, that means you are hemorrhaging money with PPC advertising. If, however, the lifetime value of a customer is £500 and you're spending £120 to acquire them, that is a scalable business model, and you'll raise millions of pounds at Series A valuations in order to acquire customers, because you've demonstrated a viable business model. But if you're making £30 from that customer and then they churn and you're paying 120 for it, well, that's great. You've got £30 revenue from a customer. That is fantastic. But you might be premature to be spending money on pay-per-click advertising, and you might want to explore SEO or other free methods, or if you need to prime the pump with pay-per-click advertising, then you're living slightly on borrowed time. You're losing money on each customer, but you're now trying to improve your cost per click and improve your lifetime value and retention so that the numbers get on the right side of zero for that. All right, so now
do you want to input? Sorry, I can see you waving.
yes, so now I'm going to turn to you on turn on video, wave, and now look at the screen and see. So hello, Demense, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Well, that's the name of my company. It's Carol. I just
Oh,
wanted
right,
to give
okay.
I just wanted to give you a bit of context on the question. So my question was more like, I have an app, and you have a freemium model. So you have users, and then how many of them that they are already using your app, they go and pay for it, like, you know, say Lumosity, yeah, to have something that could be. So I was told that in that case, of course, it depends on the product itself, but it's quite low, let's say. Thank you.
Right. So again, you know, what is low? And that's, you know, coming back to some of the questions that investors will tell you all sorts of random stuff as you talk to them. They'll go, oh, 3% conversion is low. So what you want to really have is you want to have answers to things so that, you know, the first time an investor asks you something, it'll probably catch you out. But by the second or third time, you want to have the right answers. So if an investor goes, well, you know, it's like only a 3% conversion, you go, actually, in this space, 3% is very good. You know, it's free content, it's magazines linking to us, and if we can capture 3%, that is in fact a really great business model. When it comes to pay-per-click advertising, we'll be getting it to aim to get it to north of 10% in order to have a positive lifetime value on a customer compared to our customer acquisition cost, and that would be the way to field that one. Now, I haven't yet covered the answer to what to do if investors ask all sorts of random things. What I like to do is not take it as sacrosanct words of wisdom. Just take it as another data point, as you should from everything you're hearing from me on this call. So you're gathering data points, and the more data points you gather, the firmer you are in your beliefs and plan. The question is, if you keep changing your mind at every investor pitch, firstly, you'll be going nuts trying to pander to the last investor on the next one. And secondly, you know, like blowing in the wind, your team will be driven nuts because what you're building is now changing all the time. On the flip side, if you are fixated on an idea and impervious to feedback, that to me, I mean, you could be a visionary. Everyone's telling you that this crazy, whatever it is a bad idea. Or more likely, you're just not listening to people and you are setting yourself up for failure by not adapting to feedback. So I think it's kind of like a weighted feedback, which is in the early days, you'll modify things quite a lot based on feedback. But very quickly, the ship is now sailing and it might move a little bit based on feedback. And you want to figure out, are you getting to your milestone, your destination? And if you've achieved product market fit and you've seen signs of traction, keep going that way. But if you're not getting there, then of course you've got the hard decision with your team to figure out how to tweak what you've got and how to pivot or how to adjust your messaging. And I think the biggest problem that startup founders make is they believe they're solving a problem. They might be solving a problem only they really have, or the solution to the problem, they're talking about how clever they are on their website, rather than the problem they are truly solving. And you may be far better off listening to and talking to your customers and figuring out, get them to, you know, get on a call with them, go to a cafe, buy them a coffee and have them walk through their website with you. Go to my website. What do we do? Why would you use me? Okay, great. What's the next step? And if you get users being able to use your website, then you not only have a product that will get product market fit quickly, but when an investor asks you some random question, you might then be able to tell them, actually, we've sat with dozens of customers and we've gone through this with them. And actually, customers tell us this is the most valuable feature. And of course, that helps in two ways. One of them, you know, it means you don't need to go off on the investor's random direction. And two, the investor sees that you're fixated on customer-driven development, which I love to do at Seed Legals. The whole team takes customer feedback, puts it in a Slack channel. I've been talking with some new members of our product team to focus on picking the most important customer feedback pieces and action that in the next sprint. So if investors see that that's your focus, then they won't delve as much because they know you're already onto that with much better data than them. All right, now, question from anybody.
Let's go with Ajit.
Hello.
Hi, Anthony. How are you?
Good, thank you.
My question is, say, for example, I am building a B2C consumer fintech app. And my question is, say, initially, we make the platform free, making it easy for consumers to use without any upfront commitment or anything like that. At some point in time, we want to monetize. So we will have to introduce some fee. So how do we make that transition? What would be the triggers or the push for those same people to start paying?
Okay.
And more importantly, how can I explain this thing to investors? Because their question will be, why will the same customers who are using it for free pay you?
Right. That, of course, is the billion-dollar question. And you've got obviously the investor question, which is how you're going to convince them. But you also really have the key consumer one, which is people happily using your product for free. Will they pay? So how do you get past that catch-22? Well, there are a few possibilities, none of which I can say with any degree of certainty. And by the way, there's a third problem, which is that if people have signed up and are actually loving and using it for free, and you now tell them from next month, I either cut off your access or you start paying, you've just turned happy customers into unhappy ones. And then if you keep giving them off the books freebies, then it's they remain happy, but you never get to a business model. So what might be the way around it? Well, one way, for example, might be to try and show that it is a paid product. Right from the beginning, your pricing page shows paid, but as part of the beta program, it's free for the next 90 days or something like that. So you can show investors that people signing up are actually signing up on the basis that it will be paid, but while you work out the initial thing or getting the initial feedback, it's free. You might also have some sort of sign-up system where rather than the person inputting credit cards, you get on a call with them, which you might want to do initially. Obviously depends on the product. If it's a paid product, you definitely want to start engaging with the customer. I mean, if you know Seed Legals, there's our web chat. Our team is fixated on, working directly with customers, being their unlimited input, and turning all web visitors into conversations. So if you can start engaging your customers and show that they are going to sign up to a paid plan, but for now, it's free, that might bridge the gap. So it's expectation management with your customers and with your investors to show a pricing page. It shows that customers are, to the extent you can, signing up for something that is going to be paid, but while you are beta testing them, you are giving them a free period. I mean, mileage will vary, but this is one of the key problems that businesses will have. And I have spoken to startups that have found they've got decent numbers of people using the product for free and just cannot get them to pay. So if you find yourself in that position, the nice thing, of course, is there's constant iteration. So you could change your pricing page literally today to something else that shows, you signing up to a plan that is going to be £8 a month, but your first 90 days are free. You can cancel anytime. So something where the customer is expecting that it will convert. And even if you haven't built the whole automatic conversion process, you can always reach out to the customer after a while and say, hey, how are you liking it? Per our plan, we'd love to be able to start billing you, whatever it might be. So it's all about that sort of expectation management, but you can iterate frequently. And you can also do some one-on-one testing and calls with customers to ask them how much they think is a reasonable price for this product. would you pay this? What are the additional features you'd need that would persuade you to pay? So turn it from I'm just looking at the traffic and no one's clicking the buy button into a conversation with them, with the customer, and that then can be used to show the investor as well. All right, Matt, you've got your hand up. I don't know if I'm driving here, but Matt, over to you. And I hope, Ajit, that answered the question.
Yeah, hi. My question is, I suppose, around revenue. And would you suggest hitting a certain revenue level before telling investors and put it into your deck that you actually have revenue? So I've tried a few different things. We've got, nominal revenue. It's not gonna, it doesn't kind of move the needle on that front for now. But we're not focused on generating as much revenue as possible right now. But what I've found is that I get more interest, more really deep conversations with investors if I tell them I don't have any revenue, versus when I tell them I have £1,000 a month in revenue. And what I don't do is let that £1,000 a month dictate what kind of pricing they put on our round as well. So would you suggest 5, 10, 15,000 a month before saying we have revenue?
That is a great point. So I think there are, so let me start with probably the negative one. So the negative one is where you've, sometimes founders, while they're building the product, will start doing a bit of time and material contracting service through the company. So the company ends up with 20K of revenue 6 months ago, and now you're building the platform version. And that counts, I think, as a bit of a negative. Firstly, the investors will see that you've had revenue that was awesome, and then it went to zero, and now you have to explain, oh, it was a different thing. Secondly, if you're looking to, raise with SEIS or EIS, you've got 2 years from first revenue for the company that you can raise SEIS, and you've got 7 years for EIS. So if you started billing through the company yourself, even if it's nothing to do with the product, we did some consulting services to get some cash in, that you've started your SEIS clock. It may not be a problem because you may have raised your full round in a year and it didn't really matter. But always think about getting revenue for things that don't align with your business. So now, when is the right time to actually mention revenue? Well, I think if you're doing 10 or 15K a month, that is actually a good revenue number that you would want to be proud of. That's 150K a year in revenue. I mean, that's essentially almost an SEIS funding round, or it is an SEIS funding round that you're able to get in revenue, reducing the cost of or dilution for your investors later. And that's worth, £2 million a year in valuation alone. So if you're doing 10 or 15K in revenue, that is fantastic. But there's a catch, which is investors like to see growth. And if it turns out you've been doing 3K a month for the last year, for you, it's great. You've got, 35K in revenue. But for your investor, it's a clear sign of zero growth. And they will now be drilling into, why will my investment change that? Maybe I'm giving you 150K between the investors, and you're still doing 3K a month. That's a hobby business. Well, it's not even a hobby business because you can't pay your rent on that. That's definitely not an equity growth business. So of course you can't say you've got zero revenue if you really have revenue. So you'd want to show how it was doing some testing. It's not related to the real products, but I think the time to start talking about revenue, even if it's modest, is if it's growing each month. And it's that traction that's going to be the attractor. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does.
All right. Thank you. Anthony, over to you.
Hello, Anthony. Good morning. So basically, my question is about something that you mentioned before. We recently pivoted around, let's say it was more of an internal focus pivot. So basically, I was talking with a fund like Stride VC. So at the first place, when they read my message and the market we are dealing, they liked it. They asked for a pitch, and then they mentioned that they are not fond enough of the market that we're going after in order to prioritize it over, their other opportunities they're going after this time. So basically, my question is, didn't really like the fact that now we are going after, let's say, two markets that they are like correlated, and you can have strong presence in both of them. To give you a little bit of information, imagine Celsius. So yeah, what could like result in that? Like, didn't they like the markets, or should they not do the pivot? Like, what do you think about that?
Right, great question. So it comes back to where we started, I think, which is you met with one investor, and this sounds like a strategic investor, who gave you feedback on what they were interested in. So if you want to get investment from them, you may well need to pivot to be interesting to them. The more important question is, should you do that? And maybe you should just ignore them and focus on what you really want. So if you're changing, imagine, I like to think of the founder as Moses going through the desert, and you've got your tribe, your team who are following you on your mission. And if every day you go, great, we're going to go left today, and oh, no, we're going to go right. Wait, I think there's an oasis. I mean, you're going to die in the desert. On the other hand, if you just go, we're going this way, I don't care what it is, we're just going this way, you're probably also going to die in the desert. So what is the right amount of tweaking based on information that's not too much and not too little? And I would say, you know, one of my startups I was interested in when I was, you know, running a few horses in parallel with Seed Legals, had an idea, and I reached out to Slack to see if Slack's got a fund, and Slack made it clear that the thing I was building was kind of like competing with Slack, and had I changed it completely to be a plugin in Slack, then they may be interested in investing. But I really wasn't interested in being a plug-in to Slack. I wanted to be its own thing. And so I actually did the opposite. So you may find it really comes down to your strategy. But it sounds like from your one data point that you've provided, I think if there was a very high likelihood that Stripe would invest, and you think the future of the company is based on that, then go that route. But from what you're saying, from the tone of your question, it sounds like actually that was a bit of an outlier, and you still, without knowing anything about what you do, that's not enough of a data point to change your direction, and you would want to either gather more info or continue on your existing approach. And obviously there's, you know, with the limited data that you get a very limited answer, but I hope that's helpful. All right, Ewan, over to you.
That was very helpful, Anthony. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Hey, long time no see. So my question is, so the issue that I've had is I've gone to invest, they've said, hey, are you revenue generating or not? And clearly at the moment we're not. But the things would have orders for, say, our IPA for around 2,000 cans, which would generate around £6,000 in revenue. And so my point to them is the moment we do get funding, the pipes unlock and revenue starts coming in, like almost the moment we get investment. But obviously that's not exactly what they want to hear. So I just wondered, if you have confirmed orders that will generate revenue, how do you kind of convince an investor to invest that way almost?
Right, so that's a you know, standard issue that many companies that have physical goods that they're selling, where they need to buy stock and so on, you know, you can land yourself in that catch-22 where you need to use the investment money or something to buy stock. By the way, note that buying stock is usually not an SEIS use of funds or EIS, it's for growth. And so when you do your advance assurance, make sure that you are raising investment or showing that you're raising investment for building the product and team, and not just for buying stock. And you can use 20% of your SEIS funds for non-qualifying activities. And it sounds like, you know, £6,000 is okay, but we've had a company that wanted to spend £200,000 on whiskey, and HMRC said that was not a risk to capital. I think there was much amusement at HMRC when people are wanting to buy whiskey and they think there's a risk to capital. There's no risk to capital. You can always sell that whiskey. But you know, if it's just £6,000, then really what you know, if you're finding it hard to raise a large round in order to get that modest amount of money, I think that's really where seed fasts come in. So if you can find your first investors for £5,000 each, you just need 10 grand. Seed fast may be the thing to break through that catch-22, you've got just enough money that you can now buy the stock to get it out there, and then you use it as the traction afterwards. So you might explore, you know, raising some bridge finance ahead of the round. Once upon a time, you've gone to the bank to borrow money, because that's classic. I'm selling cheese. I borrow money from the bank, sell more cheese. But of course, banks, they've got their own problem. They'll only lend usually when there's a revenue model and you're not there. So seed fast might be the breakthrough on that. All right. Any other hands up that I see? Yes, Prasanna. Hi.
Hi, Anthony. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good to connect. So I'm a founder of a fintech startup, so I have a couple of questions for you. The first one is like, there's a kind of a rumor that I hear all the time, like, is there an expectation that once you say that you're launched, then the expectation of the level of traction increases, as in, you know, if you say that you are building a wait list, maybe you could easily do that. And then, do you see that trend? And secondly, you know, if we are raising, like, let's say 150K versus 500K versus a £2 million raise, does the investor have different expectations on the MRRs, for example, like, you know, for example, or the traction that is required? So for example, if you're raising 150K instead of a 500K,
so those are two great questions, and I've got enough info to answer. So on the first part, by the way, you're a mind reader, because the very next item on my list was the wait list. So is a wait list a good idea? But before that, let me take a quick step back. I think there are two good times to raise investment and one not so good time. The first good time is at idea stage. You're nowhere near building it yet. So investors are investing based on the founders, the vision, the hype, you know, how we'll change the world. And there's no data point to show if it's working or not. And the second good time is post-launch, once you've got traction, user growth, revenues, because there you've got data to support you. The not so good time is right after launch, because it's very rare, you know, if no one's a Clubhouse or whatever, where it suddenly pops and you've got tens of thousands of users and huge amounts of traffic. Usually you open the doors and like 3 people come, and that's kind of a bit of a downer, because it sort of almost proves the point that there is no market, but you know that that's where you've got to do your hard work on customer acquisition. So what you want to do is try to raise enough money that will see you not to launch, but post-launch, so you can get past that phase and actually be raising again when you've got some traction. So now, in terms of gathering traction, the question is what you can do, because you spent all this time building it, and now you know, go, ta-da, we're open, and nobody comes. So how can you open with a pop? And so thing number one is you could use a wait list, and you can gather email addresses. I think it's a fine thing to do, but just putting an email capture on your website will get you 73 email addresses, which is great. Can you make as much noise as possible? And it all comes down, in my view, to making as much noise on social, on elsewhere. Product Hunt is a great way to go. If you can make it to the first page of Product Hunt, which is no mean feat, then you're going to get a great deal of traction. And you need to orchestrate with that with your team. But focusing on Product Hunt is fantastic, because Product Hunt is all about building consumer desire, and it's going to focus the mind like nothing else across you and your team. It's a fantastic collaborative opportunity to go, what is it that's going to make it pop on Product Hunt? You're going to be on Twitter, you're going to be on LinkedIn, you're going to be driving it on social, you're going to have prepped as many people as you can to go and vote for you on Product Hunt. You're going to be there on Product Hunt yourself, answering consumer questions. You're going to make a fantastic consumer-friendly pitch with a lifestyle image. So in fact, everything to make it pop on Product Hunt is also, assuming you're a B2C product, also going to be the thing to make it pop in real life. So if you can try and organize a Product Hunt campaign, that's amazing. Remember, you can probably only do it once on Product Hunt until you've got a new product. So don't squander the opportunity, but focused on that, which then could also lead to the wait list beforehand. I don't have the magic answer, but it's all about rustling up as much traction as possible. So now, yeah, go for it.
Sorry, is the product hunt would work for UK market as well as it does in the US market, or?
Sure. I mean, you've got your work cut out to make it to page 1 if it's just UK. You may not be able to make it to page 1 but US users may not be able to use it, but they still may be able to comment that it's a great idea, or look at the website, and the website might be saying, sign up here for US later. In the UK, great, click to go. Other countries, leave your email. So that would be leveraging it. And now you might even say to your investors, you've got, I mean, it depends how many email addresses you collect. So now when it comes to the next part of your question, which is, if your revenue is 10K a month, 100K a month, or $1 million a month, how does it affect your valuation? And the answer is, that is the determinative factor for your valuation and how investors perceive your company. So, funding rounds, every idea is different, but I think they go kind of like this, which is, you've built nothing, so you've got a nice PowerPoint and idea, great, raise 50K from friends and family. All right, you've built something, but you're not live yet, 150K, 200K, SEIS, EIS, angel investors. Oh, you've built something, it's launched, and you've got some traction, you've got some users, but maybe no revenue. That is your classic seed round, raising £500,000 or thereabout from angels and early stage funds or SEIS funds. Oh, you've got revenue of maybe £100,000 per month, £1 million a year. That's a 10 million plus valuation. That's the perfect time to start raising a Series A round from VCs and funds, and if you can get index ventures and the like. So each of these is your stage of development is going to match an investor profile and of course the valuation as well. And our Seed Legals data shows that companies dilute a median of 15% in a funding round. So you might take your revenue once you've got revenue, or sorry, take your revenue and previously it was a multiple of 10, which is your valuation, roughly between 8 and 15, depending on your level of growth. These days, it might be depressed from that, but I think in the UK, it's probably not dissimilar. But if you don't yet have revenue, then you might simply take your amount that you want to raise, multiply it by 5, and that's your valuation. So if you're raising 200K, that might be at £1 million pre-money valuation. So your post-money valuation is £1.2 million. The investors own 200 out of 1.2, which is 16%, roughly 15%. Now, of course, you might be raising the seed fast ahead of the round or doing a rolling close round, so those numbers get blurred, but that's your sort of general rule of thumb. All right, next question. I think we're kind of out of time. So Purdy, MA, maybe it's time for 1 or 2 questions quickly.
You do have time. We have Mayor's had his hand up for a while, and then Omer wanted to do a really quick practice pitch. But are you tight on time? Because we can.
I think I'm good to keep going. So
okay, perfect.
All right,
Mayor.
Thank you. I felt like a school sports team, and I had that for ages. No one picked me. Hi, Anthony. So a really quick follow-up question to my earlier one. So we're B2B, we're cybersecurity, and we've already raised a pre-seed. And my question is, so we're going to release our beta this quarter. And so it was really about how do we start to update that traction slide whilst we're gaining traction. And so what sort of things to put in there whilst we're getting traction. And we're sending our deck out to maintain relationships with VCs we spoke to last year. So they're asking for updates. So just really to build relationships as opposed to raise. We'll probably raise sort of Q4, Q1.
All right. And what is the product, if I can ask?
Yeah, so it's data security for APIs.
Okay. So
I mean, risk of native APIs. Yeah.
Yeah. So investors are always saying that they love updates and they want to be kept warm. I think they say that because the investor isn't ready to invest, has no idea what you're doing, doesn't want to go, sorry, dude, I have no idea what you're doing, I'm out, because they might lose a hot deal. So they go, yeah, keep me updated on progress. But I think there's no harm in doing that. If you, if you're microblogging and sending them an update twice a week, hey, our design team has made a new upload button. They're eventually going to go, please stop emailing me, you're driving me crazy. But if you've got nice updates, then that is useful. And you might every month have an update. And I get posts from some founders that are periodic updates. So if it can rise to be something interesting, I think that's great. And of course, if you're not launched yet, your updates are going to be, hey, we've got a new designer who's joined the team, and we've done user testing, and we've tried 3 things. And basically, I think one of the key things that an investor is looking for are a founding team who are fixated on metrics, on customer growth, on customer awesomeness. And if they see that coming through, and they see that in your mind you've got a clock that's ticking to get to success, then that's a key thing that they would want to favor over others who've just gone silent and so on. So of course you don't want to spam people with meaningless things, but if you can find something that indicates growth and traction and have an investor list, I think that is very good. If you do your pitch page on Seed Legals, we want to enhance that to be a microblogging thing where you can use that to send out updates. But for now, when people view your pitch, you'll see their email address, and you can see if they've registered interest beyond that to find out more. And you can collect email addresses that way. But however you collect email addresses, whether they be for investors or customers, sending them updates. And by the way, the other thing is that even if you don't have enough for a special investor update, if you've got customer updates, you might start sending those to investors. You might, set it so the same email can go to both. So investors don't go, why am I getting your updates on tea? You might also have enough of it so that the investors can go, oh, right, it's the fundraising progress and things like that. So use, if you can, those updates. I think it's a great idea. Ultimately, you may find that investors have said, yeah, send me updates, but they didn't really mean it. But why not take them at their word on that? I hope that helps.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm a Seed Legals customer, by the way, but you send an update, and the first thing you get back is, have you got an updated deck? And that's the reason for that work in progress deck question.
I think so the problem with updating the deck is it takes time and effort to update the deck. And every time you update the deck, some people have got different versions of the deck than others. So my quick slide deck advice is, make 2 versions of the slide deck. One of them is just about the product, the market, and so on. And it doesn't have the business plan part in it. So that one doesn't need to be updated. I mean, it gets updated as you get new cool graphics, and you've now got a design, and it's not your own work, and based on feedback. But you don't need to keep changing the 5-year business plan and the amount, that the valuation and stuff like that. And the other one is the one with more business details in it that you'll share one-on-one with a smaller number of investors. And the reason is you don't really want different versions of the deck with different business plans on it. Certainly you don't want stale versions of the deck out that show numbers that you now verifiably haven't hit. You sent out a deck last year that was going to say you're doing 20K a month in revenue by now, and now you're not. And there's a deck that says you are. So if you keep that in mind, one of the decks is somewhat impervious to change other than awesomeness. And the other one with numbers in it is one that you're going to do one-on-one with investors when you do a presentation to them. All right, Purdy, MA, next question.
Okay, last one. Omer wants to do a really quick practice pitch. Can it be like a 60 or 90-second version?
Absolutely, go for it. Hello.
Hi, Anthony. How are you?
Hi, good to see you. All right.
Good to see you too. Yeah. So I'm meeting 2 prospects, so I figured I'll just do a 60-second quick one. And it was based on, I guess, where we were last year versus now being a bit more defined. I think these investors will continue to be on seed fasts. versus a full formal round.
All right.
So just
All
to
right. Well,
contextualize.
let's dive in. Pretend that we are coming in cold. Over to you.
Okay. My name is Omer, founder of Neurometry. The company was formed based on research that's 5 years deep now. We were funded by Novartis and did a funding round last year. We're targeting dementia and its early detection and rehab, amongst other diseases. We're working with several medical institutes on clinical trials, but plan to introduce a product in a non-clinical version this year. We've made a slight pivot from going from business to business, where we found care homes to be a bit slow, to moving into direct to consumer space, and we're preparing our content for launching the product. We're still in pre-revenue phase, and our trials are expected to last about 1.5 years before we're officially regulated on that. Yeah, we don't have many competitors in our area, but yeah, we're software and gaming led.
All right. So thank you. So if we go back to what I'd mentioned earlier, which is what's the problem? How are you solving it? What's the market size? What's the traction? What's the ask? You missed the most important thing, which is what do you tell us? What do you want? So let me try another approach and by the way, you led sort of with the team first. It was a slight Pulp Fiction version of the pitch. It meandered. So let's try something like dementia is the #1 problem in society. As we have a growing population, an aging population, we all have, familiar with relatives with dementia. It's a huge drain on families and a serious problem. There are no good solutions for that. It's obviously an intractable problem, but Neurometry changes this in a fundamentally different way. We're going to be the solution for the aging population. And now people are going, oh yes, I've got a mother, aunt, whatever, I'm all ears. So now you're going to explain the next thing, which is what the product is. And then you're going to say maybe the size of the market, if you've got some data. You might talk briefly. There are 3 companies that have something in the space. One of them is only for the NHS. It's not for people. One of them is whatever. Our team, I'd probably leave the team too late. The team is 5 amazing people with a bunch of history, and we're raising X amount. I don't think you need to spend time saying you've pivoted and things that can come later. So it's really a tightly scripted pitch that gets people excited and then brings them in. All right. Well, thank you. And obviously if the first time you've pitched is to an investor, you've kind of wasted an opportunity by using the investor as the guinea pig. And that's exactly why I know it's tough to go and pitch to people on a call like this, particularly since when you pitch, you're often a slight out-of-body experience, the presentation mode that has your spouse, if he or she's in the room looking at you going, dude, that's kind of weird. What's this presentation mode you're in? But you have to do that. You have to get on stage and you have to pitch and show that you're confident and aggressively looking to build the future, as you see often Americans do very well. British are a bit more subdued, but that's that out-of-body experience that you need to master. And when investors sense that, then that gets them excited that you will be the Moses in the desert and taking both your team and your customers and them to the promised land.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much for going over. Appreciate that. I'll let you log off as I go over a few wrap-up details with everybody. So wave goodbye to Anthony, everyone. Say thanks.
Well, thank you, everyone. I hope that was helpful. It was a slightly sort of, it's a difficult topic. I mean, usually it's nice to go, and the answer is A, B, and C, but of course this is endless number of things, but a lot of it is simply the projection of confidence, knowledge, and investors seeing that you focus on something and will deliver it, and now taking as many data points as you can to support a proposition that's otherwise unverifiable. And that in a nutshell is the traction piece. So if there's anything I can help with, please let me know. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.